Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. Town Council meeting this evening, December 10th, 2019. Thank you for coming out this blustery evening. This is good old Blowing Rock weather. So that being said, I call this meeting to order. And if you would, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All righty. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from November 12th, 2019 regular meeting minutes?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from November 12th, 2019?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Do I have a motion to approve the agenda moving forward?
So made.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, so it be. Tonight, as you all are aware of, we do have a transition taking place. Council member Jim Steele is leaving us, and I want to say personally that it's been really a pleasure working with you. You know, I dealt with numbers for years, and you gave a new light on numbers, and particularly from a town standpoint of which I was not familiar with. So I, as mayor, would like to duly thank you. And we would all like to gratefully acknowledge your 8 years of dedication to the town of Blowing Rock. We thank you so very much, and that's 8 years on council, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And you did how many years
9.
in addition to that?
Just such a.
Could y'all move down a little bit and get a photo? You want to move up front and get a photo? Oh, we got the seal behind us. Here we go. What's that?
Can I say something?
Oh, yes, yes, sir.
Do you want to sit down? Should we sit down?
I won't take but a minute. Southerners usually don't banter. Yankees do. This guy taught me how to banter, and he never won after that. And I'm gonna miss it. I'm gonna miss it, old buddy.
Smile for Thomas there, Albert.
Well, it was just a joy to serve y'all and to be with these people. And it's bittersweet. But I look back on my time and think we did some good things. And I know I disappointed some of you, but that's what it's all about when you serve, I guess. And the house looks good outside there. But I'm sure glad I moved here 20 years ago. And I know y'all will do a good job. Thanks again for your service, what you've done. Bye-bye.
We're going to take a 5-minute recess. Back in session. We'll move forward now with our elected officials' oath of office. And I guess I'm first. Okay.
Repeat after me. I, Charlie Sellers, do solemnly
Miss Greta Wilson, I believe, is going to give Mr. Albert Yance his oath. Thank you for coming, Miss Wilson.
Absolutely. Glad to be here. I, Albert Yount, do solemnly swear
I do solemnly swear
that I will support and maintain the Constitution and laws of the United States,
that I will maintain and support the Constitution and laws of the United States,
the Constitution and laws of the State of North Carolina,
the Constitution and the laws of the State of North Carolina,
and the town of Blowing Rock,
and the town of Blue Rock,
not inconsistent therewith,
not inconsistent therewith,
and that I will faithfully discharge
and that I will faithfully discharge
the duties of the office of council member
the duties of the office of council member
to which I have been entrusted
to which I have been entrusted
without fear or favor,
without fear or favor,
so help me God.
so help me God.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Miss Wilson. Mr. David Harwood. Welcome, Mr. Harwood.
Thank you, Mayor.
Miss Hillary will give you your oath of office.
I, David Harwood,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and maintain
that I will support and maintain
the Constitution and laws
the Constitution and laws
of the United States,
of the United States,
the Constitution and laws
the Constitution and laws
of the State of North Carolina,
of the State of North
and
Carolina,
the town of Blowing Rock,
and the town of Blowing Rock,
not inconsistent therewith,
not inconsistent therewith,
and that I will faithfully discharge
and I will faithfully discharge
the duties of the office
the duties of the office
of council member
of council member
to which I have been entrusted
to which I have been entrusted
without fear or favor,
without fear or favor,
so help me God.
so help me God.
You already have a card? Yes.
Somebody said something earlier this evening about why we did this in January, in December and not January, and Mr. Harwood said, well, they've got to make sure they can grab me while they can. So, welcome, David.
Thank you very much.
All right, moving forward, we have nominations for the mayor pro tem. Do we have a nomination?
I'd like to nominate Sue Sweeting.
All those in favor of Sue Sweeting?
You got a second?
It doesn't require a motion.
Okay.
I have a nomination.
Yes, yes, sir.
I'd like to nominate Albert for mayor pro
Okay.
tem.
So we have two nominations. We have Sue Sweeting and Albert Yance. And Albert has a nomination?
Man of impeccable character and ethics, David Harwood.
Okay. Now we have three nominations.
Mayor, I'd like to respectfully decline the nomination.
Mr. Harwood declines the nomination, so we're back down to two,
Thank you.
which is Sue Sweeting and Albert Yance. Those in favor of Ms. Sweeting, please raise your hands. Those in favor of Mr. Yance, please raise your hands. Congratulations, Ms. Sweeting. You are now the mayor pro tem. And I would like to take that step further and say, Mr. Yance, thank you. It's been, you're excellent. Thank you so much.
It's Yunt, not Yunts.
Well, that was close.
Those are the rich Yunts.
Your family tree's like mine, okay? All right. Okay, now we're going to move on to the consent agenda. There's no discussion on the consent agenda. If there's any discussion, that we need to move that to new business or old business. So, under the consent agenda, the 2020 Mayview Madness Run. Do I have a motion?
Make a motion to approve
Do I have
consent
a-
agenda.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so be it, it does pass. The budget amendment, number 2019-17. Do we have a motion?
So made.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so be it. All right, on the public comments section, if you would like to speak, please step over and see Hillary and give her your name and address and what you would like to discuss. And we please request that you keep it to 3 minutes or less. All righty. Mr. Tim Gupton.
Thank you.
Okay, Tim, you now have 2 minutes and, yeah, I know you now have 2 minutes and 35 seconds.
Good evening, Mayor Sellers, Council Members Harwood, Matheson, Powell, Sweeting, Yount, and Town Manager Fox. My name's Tim Gupton. I live at 235 Meadow Lane. I'm here tonight speaking on behalf of the Blowing Rock Civic Association. The Board of Directors approved this particular letter for us to deliver to the council as you begin planning for the new year, and we wanted to share some thoughts. 2019 is ending on a much more positive note than the beginning of the year. After 2 divisive public hearings in the beginning of the year, we have focused on building community consensus among stakeholders and encourage public input into matters of long-term significance to promote progress and preservation of our historic village. I am personally encouraged by the open lines of communication represented by all stakeholders. We have a fresh start for 2020 after hiring a new town manager and experiencing a very positive election cycle, resulting in a new council member. We wish to welcome Mr. Harwood to the council and express our appreciation to Mr. Steele for his many years of dedicated service to our community. Everyone seems to be focused on addressing the long-term needs of preserving and growing our community. So how we move forward in 2020 will be important to our future. Let's keep in mind what the shared vision is in the 2014 Comprehensive Plan. It says, embrace change while remaining vigilant to ensure that the town's unique character and quality of life is not compromised. So to that end, we have top 10 priorities for the council to consider and incorporate into your winter retreat and to incorporate into your work plan for 2020. So these are just our recommendations for you to consider. First, complete the Valley Boulevard vision process, evaluate the recommendations out of the task force, and update the land use codes as appropriate. Second, approve a similar process, including a professional advisor, to update the 2014 Comprehensive Plan during the summer to maximize community input. Third, update the land use codes for West Main Street as recommended in the 2014 Comprehensive Plan, specifically page 3.3, to preserve existing setbacks and green space And I think as we look at the construction of 1150 Main, we can see what West Main Street is going to look like if we don't have any changes to the land use code. Adopt conditional zoning permit and eliminate conditional use permits to allow citizen input for council consideration. Update the land use code to clarify existing code and unwritten interpretations, including definitions for hotels, short-term rental, 75% green space, and downtown parking vested rights are examples. Address the downtown congestion problem, and I adopted that term recently because it's complicated, I think, by preparing and implementing a comprehensive parking and traffic management plan using an advisor to help us figure that out. Acquire land to expand our existing park. I think that's very important for our future. Set expectations for sustainable tourism and ask the TDA to prepare a tourism management plan with community input. Ninth, prepare a long-term capital improvements plan and funding plan with a priority on improvements for water and sewer. And finally, number 10, implement a local EMS coverage to adequately manage our risk, particularly for demographics of my age, and adopt the 90+9 national standard for our citizens, which is responding to 90% of the population within 9 minutes, which we don't quite achieve now. So those are our recommendations for you to consider, and I'll look forward to seeing you at the winter retreat.
Thank you, Mr. Gupton. All right, moving forward, we have our 2 presentations on for this evening. The first is the 1819 audit presentation. Martin Starnes and Associates, Ms. Paula Hodges. Thank you, Ms. Hodges.
Thank you. I prepared a brief presentation for you guys today, which takes the information from your audited financial statements and highlights what I think is the most useful for elected officials. So we'll go ahead and get started with that. Our audit opinion was unmodified, and what that means is the town received a clean audit opinion. There were no instances in which members of management and our staff could not agree as it relates to the information that you'll find in your audited financial statements. This was our first year auditing the town, and we came on site several times. We also asked a lot of questions, and we gathered a lot of information. And we always found the town staff to be very cooperative and knowledgeable and helpful. And I would just like to take an opportunity to publicly thank Nicole Norman and Shane Fox for the excellent job that they did on behalf of the town preparing for the town's audit, because it is a big year-long process, and they did an excellent job. So I just want to thank them. And the rest of the information is your information. It comes straight out of your financial statements. Your general fund increased about $700,000 this year. And this next slide shows you revenues and expenditures for 2019 as compared to 2018. I want to take just a moment to point out that this is total revenues and total expenditures, which includes your transfers in and your transfers out, as well as your sale of assets. And we'll talk more about the specific revenues and expenditures as we go further along in the presentation. Our next slide is a fund balance picture. When we talk a lot about fund balance because when you're looking at the health of the town's operating fund or the town's general fund, we always talk about fund balance. And you can see here that fund balance increased over last year. It's very important when you're looking at the health of the general fund to calculate available fund balance. An available fund balance is calculated by taking your total fund balance less amounts that are non-spendable or not in cash form. And for the town, that's inventory and prepaid items, less amounts that the state of North Carolina does not allow units of government to consider as available fund balance because they're not current resources. And that's mainly your accounts receivable. You haven't collected your accounts receivable at June 30, so they're not currently available to consider an available fund balance. So once you've calculated your available fund balance, then you would take that as a percentage of your general fund expenditures and transfers out. And what that tells you is how many months of available resources that the town has on hand in case of an emergency. So you can see here that your fund balance percentage for 2019 was 56%, which is about 7 months of available resources. Our next series of slides takes the town's major revenue sources and compares June 30, 2019 to June 30, 2018. And we'll start with ad valorem taxes, which increased about 6% over the prior year. Unrestricted intergovernmental revenue remained fairly consistent with a slight increase of less than 1%. And other taxes and licenses increased considerably. And what that's made up of is your sales and use tax as well as your occupancy tax. Now, the reason for the significant increase over prior year is because the town changed the way it reports occupancy tax in the financial statements. So you're seeing all of the occupancy tax collected by the town reported in revenues and other taxes and license, and then you're gonna see a corresponding expenditure reported for the disbursements to the TDA. So you're gonna see that as we go along. Our next series of slides shows the town's major expenditures for 2019 as compared to 2018. We'll start with general government. You're seeing a very large increase. That's because this is where that expenditure for the disbursement up to the TDA for occupancy tax is accounted for. And next we go on to public safety, which was an 8% increase. The reason for that is mainly capital expenditures, while we have a 7% decrease in transportation. And that was because you had capital expenditures in the prior year that wasn't repeated in the current year. The town's debt service increased about 17%, and that's because last year the town issued GO bonds. So you see that reflected in the payments this year. And then finally, when we talk about the town's water enterprise fund, we don't look at fund balance when we're looking at the health. I think one of the most important indicators for the health of the water enterprise fund would be your cash flow from operations. And what that tells you is the cash that you have left over from operations that you can use to fund debt service or capital improvements. So that's an important number, as well as your unrestricted net position, which for the town ended up being 1.7 million at the end of June 30. And that's all I have for you guys tonight. We do have new audit standards that happen each and every year. For next year, we don't have anything that will impact the town's financial statements, so they should be fairly consistent as far as reporting for next year. Does anyone have any questions or concerns for me?
I've got a couple if nobody else does.
Sure.
One question I had looking through this, in your perspective, were there any risk areas that you found, and how would you suggest we correct them going forward?
Any comments or concerns that we have, they will be reflected in your yellow book letter, which is at the end of your audited financial statements. And I think most of those recommendations have already been implemented for this year. As far as risk areas for the town, I think always you want to continue to look at internal controls each and every year, especially if you have any kind of turnover in staff or new people. You want to make sure that the controls remain the same. As far as our walkthrough of internal controls this year, we found that the town's controls were in place and implemented as designed. So that's a good thing.
And one more, if I may. Are you satisfied with the stability of the town going forward with looking at this?
Your financial health of the town going forward, I think the town is in a healthy place right now. Your fund balance percentage is 50%. Your policy, that is, your fund balance percentage exceeds that. You have plans for going forward as far as your capital plans and that type of thing. So I do think that you are in a good position at this point in time.
If I may elaborate, our policy is 50% fund balance. We're at 56, almost 57%. The state requires 8%, is that correct?
That is correct. 8% is
So-
the minimum fund balance. And that's equivalent to about 1 month of reserves, which in case of emergency is not a lot. And so that is definitely a minimum. And your policy is set at 50%, which is much better. It puts the town in a much better financial position.
Do you think that's high compared to other?
Well, the Local Government Commission, they do take a look at fund balance percentage. And what they do is they compare you to your population group, which is somewhat difficult for you guys because you are seasonal. And also you are in a population group with very, very small towns that do not offer services to their citizens. And then you're also in a population group with coastal areas that might want to have a larger fund balance percentage because they tend to be prone to natural disasters. You might also be you might also be in a population group with towns that are not fiscally healthy. So they're gonna have a much lower percentage. So what you would want to do, rather than just take that average percentage from the Local Government Commission, which is about 77%, you would want to compare yourself to like towns. And there's a big list, and that's what you would want to look at, is towns that are similar to you, and that would give you an idea. Towns that offer the same types of services, because if you're offering services to your citizens and you're comparing yourself to another town that's not, that's just not apples to apples, and that's what the LGC looks at, purely population, and you want to go a little bit deeper when you're comparing.
The North Carolina Department of Transportation's fund balance is 8%, so we're doing pretty good.
Yes, sir.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is there a metric or correlation between debt service and general fund balance? And if so, what should we be looking at?
There is a you have a legal debt limit, which you're not close to exceeding. There is not really a correlation between your fund balance, like a debt to equity ratio,
Right.
like that you would have in an industry. So what you're really looking at is your fund balance percentage, and then you're looking at, from a budgetary standpoint, what you can afford to pay back and what you have in reserves as far as your policy, and as to whether you would want to issue debt or you would want to use fund balance to support capital improvements and that type of thing.
That legal amount is $81 million for the town of
Yeah.
Little Rock.
Yeah, so you're not going to,
Pretty
We're
large.
not close to that.
no. No.
If so, I want off this deal. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hodges. And I think, Shane, you had a comment or two you wanted to make, reference to some information you received earlier today about, or do you want to wait until later?
I can do it now since you've set the stage for
Okay.
it. So today, this morning at 11 o'clock, we sold our third issuance within our 2014 four-phase bond issuance. We sold those bonds this morning. We had 8 bidders total. We sold those for 1.91%. To put that in perspective, there were 6 other North Carolina entities that sold bonds today. Some of note, Wake County.
That's great.
Wake County sold at 2.1%. City of Hickory sold at 2.17%. State of North Carolina sold at 1.98%. We received a comment from the LGC, Local Government Commission, that states, and I don't think I should probably quote this, but it says this might be the lowest 20-year bond issuance we've ever sold. So at 1.91%, we sold those bonds this morning. I think that's a testament, again, to the financial staff and history of this council and many before us that has put this into place.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hodges.
I know. We predicted 5, so that's really nice.
All righty. Moving forward, I'll tell you what, looks like our town's in really good shape, thanks to all the councils and the citizens. I think that really says a lot. So, thank you. Now we have the Community Initiative for Memorial Park. Mr. Sam Hess. And if you would, state your name.
Yep. Hey, Sam Glover, it's 182 Clawson Drive.
Thanks, Sam.
I guess first off, just wanted to say thank you to the council for letting us come and present some thoughts and some ideas. This came up recently for us because we're both relatively new parents, so both of our daughters are in there. So really what we wanted to kind of go through today is being new parents and being up at the park is just seeing that seeing that the conditions of the town park, which is the centerpiece of the town, right? So when we all drive up, that's where everything happens. That's where the festivals are happening. That's where people are congregating. And what we've noticed is that it just really isn't very functional for kids. It's lacking in its aesthetic appeal. I'm on the planning board, and part of that mission is to make sure that we hold developers and builders to the high aesthetic standards that we have. And we really feel like the park doesn't come near that same standard that we're holding those folks to. You can go to the next slide. Just here's a few pictures from this morning, again, in the beautiful Blowing Rock weather up there. But as you can see, one, it's pretty limited in terms of what's going on up there, but you can just see the condition of it, the look and feel, the paper coming up through the mulch there. It'll take a few days to dry, and there's really nothing, then it's not usable for a few days. And so, again, all of this that we think, you can go to the next slide. We think really it needs significant change. It's not just changing a few, the flooring or putting in a few new pieces of equipment, but, you can go to the next slide. We really want to think of the park as an asset for the town. And so the way that we think that we can do that is you can look up studies. Parks can increase property values of surrounding areas by up to 22%. It obviously increases health and wellness of a community. There's lots of different factors in there, and this is all summarized in this letter that we passed out. It's an economic driver. It brings people to the town. People talk about it. It can be an asset for both recruiting full-time residents like ourselves and tourists that are coming up part-time. A lot of part-time folks also have children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren that are coming here, and there's just really not a ton of places for younger kids to go to. And then so I guess just this last sentence here, which is that thoughtfully designed parks develop talent and contribute to the health and well-being of people, communities, and the environment. And so we really believe that. We see this as an opportunity. We just heard about the great financial state that the town is in, that there are some assets that we can take advantage of, and so we're excited about that. With that, we think making it something unique. These are just some examples of ones that we pulled, and you can see we actually put a picture of the Blowing Rock School Park, which we think encapsulated that idea. It's unique. It showcases timber frame, this mountain feel. There, unfortunately, it's part of the school, or fortunately and unfortunately, it's part of the school. So during the daytime, it's basically unavailable at certain parts of it. So, Sam's going to take over now.
And just from a personal standpoint, Sam and I both grew up here, and we both grew up going to this park every day. And I think our parents can attest to the fact that it was probably childcare for 12 hours a day in the summertime. So. Not that we want free childcare ourselves, but at the same time, we enjoyed it and hope that our children can enjoy it from their perspective and experience.
If we had a playground for them to play on right now.
So I've spoken to a lot of people, and I think that everyone can agree that this needs to happen. I think in the capital improvement plan, you'll see that there was $600,000 set aside for the replacement of the park. We feel that if we should go above and beyond replacing the park, and it should be more of an enhancement and something that's unique just to Blowing Rock and something that coming up from school, I worked at Sonny's Grill when I was growing up, and everybody that came from school would come get a basket of fries and a cheer wine and then go to the park, and it just, that kind of nostalgia, we're losing that a little bit. And I think that this initiative knowing that we know that it needs to be replaced and we have a dollar figure on that, we need to speed that process up. And we need to use those dollars now so that we can make an impact for people coming to this town, seeing what we have to offer, whether it's from a visiting standpoint or maybe potentially moving here. Sam is a prime example of that, the other Sam, not myself in the third person, but he's a prime example of that. He works remotely, and that's who we're gonna have to go after. It's very hard to have a business in this town that's not a service business. I mean, I think everybody that's been in this town has seen turnover in this town from a business standpoint, that maybe that's not the demographic we're gonna be going after. It's gonna be the people that can work up here remotely and just wanna come up here for our amazing school system. And the features of the park, and not only there, but you're connecting that to the Broyhill Lake, and then also the Devant Ball Field and the pool. So all of this kind of comes together, and I know that a lot of money has been put into tourism infrastructure, and that's very important in this town. There's no doubt about that. But if we don't have the community to support it, then it's really null and void. So essentially what we're proposing is, in the next couple of years, and the capital improvement plan is not something that's set in stone, obviously. It's something that's reevaluated every year by the council. We're proposing that the remaining 500, that, to give you a backstory, there's $100,000 in the budget currently for the park. And that's earmarked for the little park that was demolished earlier this year. But the remaining amount, we're hoping to become available in the coming year so that we can apply for a grant that would potentially match it and put up to a sum of $1.2 million in the park, which I'm sure any of you can imagine what kind of impact that would have. So we're proposing that this initiative be added as a priority to the January retreat, and requesting that a motion be made that a community-driven committee work hand in hand with Shane, Jennifer, Chris Pate, and individuals that we've met along the way that have expertise in this area that can help us implement this park initiative and make it happen sooner rather than later. And if you go to the next slide, Shane. The urgency with this matter, a lot of people in my position that don't have a lot of experience in town government probably think that, oh, we can do this next summer. I mean, it's very easy to think that, why don't we just do it? Well, I've learned through my research and meeting with all of these individuals that you see before you that it just can't happen like that if we want to do it the correct way. So, but there still is urgency, and we have to abide by this timeline to get something accomplished by 2021. And that's really the closest deadline we can make. But if we get an amount of money that we can use for funding, apply for a grant, which Jennifer has recommended that it will probably cost about $15,000 to get a grant written and approved with a firm that is reputable and has gotten us grants in the past, we could potentially get this money funded by the end of this summer, early fall, and potentially start construction on it this winter and potentially have it open for 2021. So we feel that this doesn't necessarily just adhere to our demographic and our little ones screaming over there, but it can help businesses, can help people retired here that bring their grandchildren up here and everyone in between. And so we wanted to come before the town and show the community that there is a need for this, and there is a community and a portion of the community that wants to see this through. So I appreciate you guys listening to our spiel.
Well, Sam and Sam, thank you so very much. A lot of us have grown up in the park. Now, as far as your request, yes, it is